Welcome back one and all. It's time to get this hybrid EDTracker finished then. So in this final video we're going to quickly assemble it. I'm just going to solder all the components together. We'll go over those in a second, get it in the enclosure, and then we're more interested really in configuring it all so that we can use a kind of combined MEMS and point tracking solution. So just to summarise what we've got then in terms of components. If you've been following through the 4 previous videos, you'll know all of this, but just forgive me to just summarise here. So we've got a DIY EDTracker board here. This is just kind of a vanilla assembled unit. You can see it's got the component placements left open still. But yeah, this is an MPU 9250 based gyro board. There's the usual 60 megahertz SparkFun Pro Micro on the bottom. I've got a particularly long tactile button here to put in it so that it comes up out of the enclosure. We've got our 100 ohm resistor that you'll recall we calculated back in video 2. A little PTC resettable fuse. As I said then, it's kind of over spec. It's what is it? It's 250 milliamp load, way more than we need, but I'll put it in anyway. And we've got our 3 infrared LEDs, of course. On top of that, we have our enclosure that we 3D printed. Some things that you're going to need. Obviously, you're going to need some wire to just wire the LEDs up. You can either find something kind of suitably narrow gauge. If you haven't got any wire, just find if you can find like some network cable or some telephone cable, 6 core or 8 core, and just strip out the internal cores out of that. That should do you perfectly fine. In terms of tools, nothing massively special here. I'm going to use a hot glue gun to kind of fix it together and seat the board into the enclosure. Screwdrivers, some basic tools. Obviously we've got a soldering iron, fairly important, and then I've just got my clamp, but you don't absolutely need one of those. Right, okay, so let's get started with just putting the components in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick the resettable fuse into this board. Most importantly, our 100 ohm resistor, or whatever you've calculated to be the necessary resistor value for yours. I'm going to put the button in, and then we're going to start taking off from these LED feed points here and run our series circuit of the 3 IR LEDs. So through one, through the second, through the third, back to the LED minus on here. Let's get started doing that then. Fire up the soldering iron and get it warming up and get going. Right, so next trick then is to run the wires up this tail to connect to the LED at the top. So I'm going to take a couple of these, which are conveniently kind of already in a twisted pair for me, and I'm going to push that up the tail. And then I can see them just in the end there. I'm just going to get some tweezers and I'm going to grab. Now I've got some heat shrink here, some heat shrink tubing, which I'm just going to use on one of the pins just to kind of protect them from shorting out. So that will kind of go over like so, and just sort of cover the wire, because obviously you don't want these touching and earthing out against each other. One thing to remember on these particular IR LEDs that we're using, the longer pin, which is normally the anode, is not, it's the cathode on these ones. So we need to make sure we put negative to the long one, positive to the short one. So that's just to remember. That's specific to my particular LEDs that I'm using. Could be different if you're using different ones, just bear it in mind. close enough. I'm just going to leave that there because I'm going to hot glue that LED into the tip there. It's a little bit wonky at the moment, but I'll come back to that. I'm just going to leave that. And I'm just going to do the other two LEDs now. Don't need to video that. I'm going to whiz through and just solder up some wires, some more lengths I've got here. Just down these runs here. Leave them space to come over to the corner of the board over here. And get all that done. So let me do that and I'll come back in a sec. Right then, so I've got the hot glue gun warming up. What we've got here, you can see, is I've got underneath the board, I've got the positive here is running a blue wire up to the first LED up here. White wire coming back down. I'm routing it up through this hole in the PCB. That's rather convenient. And then bringing that across to this LED over here. Then a blue one going over the other side to this LED, and then a length of white here, which will just be the return back to the LED negative on the board there. So I'm going to just use the hot glue to kind of fix the PCB in place, just start holding it down, and then I'm also going to try dabbing it on the wires as well, just to kind of hold the wires in place and while I'm assembling it all. Okay, so let's get that done. So there we go, I've just run some little bits of glue just down the gaps here, just to kind of hold the board in place, just so the board's not kind of moving around. It's still removable, you know, you could pull that out if you needed to in the future. Okay, so I'm back. I've used a Dremel just to take these holes out a little bit. I mean, you could redesign and reprint the enclosure, but we only needed kind of like half a mil of extra clearance, so it didn't really warrant reprinting it all. So I just Dremeled out the edges here and here, just underneath the LEDs, just to give them a bit more space. I've also, you can see, just flattened out this PTC because it was sticking up and hitting the top of the enclosure. So that's just flattened out. So yeah, we've got the wires in there. We've got you know, the LEDs in series through there, and the button just about comes proud of there. You can see. That's why you do need a long button if you intend to use one. Remember, you can use a feature in the software in the UI to do the recentering, so you don't absolutely have to put the button in here. Yeah, there we go. So that's looking better. Still needs a bit of glue to hold it down. So if this is maybe a little bit of glue on the tips of the lugs that we put on. And then stick it on. There we go. Okay, so we're done with the physical build. Let's plug it in, calibrate it up, show you how to configure Opentrack to use two sources, and let's see how it performs and see if this whole hybrid EDTracker thing was really worth it. Let's get this set up then in the software, show you how to use it, but one quick caveat first. It is a blistering day here in the UK. It's like knocking on 30 degrees, so I'm afraid I've got the windows open, I've got a fan going, so if there's any background noise you're just going to have to put up with it. I've moved the microphone here, hopefully that makes things a bit more bearable, but it's a scorcher. Okay, so what have I got? We've got set up here. You can see the thing is attached to my old headset here, just a couple of cable ties there. Lead running down, stress relief on the cable, yada yada yada. That's plugged in. Up here I've got my Sony PSI camera. It has been modified. I modified it myself years ago. It's had the IR filter removed, and then you have to sit and tweak the focal length on it, just get it nice and right. But that's worked for years. Nice solid camera, what everybody uses really. Okay, so here on the screen I've got set up the EDTracker UI, and that's for the DIY version, remember, not a Pro, and I've got Opentrack as well. I'm going to start with the EDTracker UI first, because we always start there really. So what the important bits you can see here, it's all calibrated. I've done all the mag calibration. One thing we want to do is just kind of set level. It should be fairly calibrated, to be honest. I'm going to redo it just to be on the safe side, so I'm going to hold that flat and still, taking its time. There we go. Okay, so the important things here, I've got yaw scaling set to 1 for Opentrack. If you're using FaceTrackNoIR, you need to set those to 5. So linear and 5 on FaceTrackNoIR. Don't ask me why. No, I'm not going to go into it. But yeah, for Opentrack, as we always suggest, keep the yaw scaling, pitch scaling to 1, and linear response mode. That is fine. Okay, so we can see that's kind of making sense. It doesn't show roll, but roll will be there. So I'm going to minimise the UI. Now we move to Opentrack. Now I'm using 2.2, so with Opentrack 2.3 they removed the feature for having dual inputs into your tracking. Yeah, from 2.2 stable they had this concept of a main tracker and an auxiliary tracker, which is what we want. You can use FaceTrackNoIR. In fact, let me just bring this briefly up. I'll just show you FaceTrackNoIR. FaceTrackNoIR has the concept of a master and a second tracker as well, so you can use that. There are a few peculiarities in FaceTrackNoIR that make me suggest not to bother with it. The joystick input's a bit weird. You have to set these values to minus and plus 1,000. Also, in game, it doesn't. When you've looked fully behind yourself, if you move your head to one side to look round, it moves the opposite way. Opentrack has sorted that, so you can use either. My recommendation would be Opentrack at the moment until a couple of bugs are maybe fixed in FaceTrack. So we'll go with Opentrack 2.2 stable, quite an old release. Main tracker, we choose point tracker 1.1. In settings, we want only the X, Y and Z axes enabled. So we're only using the point tracker to do the lateral tracking, yeah, not roll, pitch or yaw. So those are blank. Camera, you want to choose the camera that you're using. I'm using 640 by 480 at 60 frames a second. You can go up to 120 if you lower the resolution. I kind of needed that resolution. I found it kind of picks up the points better. Plus, because this is only doing lateral tracking, I'm kind of happy that 60 frames a second is enough for that. I don't need quite so much. You'll need to fiddle around with threshold and hysteresis. Hysteresis? How do you say that word? Yourself, your min and max point diameters. I've got 2 and 6 is working fine for me. And then you move over to model. You want to put the dimensions of your model in. So for me, it's these values here: 110 centimeters front to back, 40 in height between that and these LEDs, and then 65 between them that way. But just measure it, or if you've designed the model yourself, put your own values in there. I've put just an arbitrary 10 centimeters up from the middle of my head. I've not really measured it, but it's quite close enough. That's about it for the point tracker. Your auxiliary tracker then, here, you want to choose joystick, and then make sure you choose your EDTracker 2 joystick in the settings. I'm using the Acceler filter here, just with the kind of default values. I've not fiddled with that. Game protocol, you want free track 2. In settings, you want use track IR, hide free track. And you will of course want to do some fiddling with your mapping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start that now. If I click start, we'll get the preview image up, hopefully. There it is. So we can see our point model being tracked. There it is. Yada yada yada. That little blue spot there is just a window at the back here. In fact, it seems to be managing with it, so that's fine. Just to prove that this is all working, you can see the lateral, the translation tracking here. Yeah, if you look at X here moving left and right. If I cover the camera up, you can see those all drop out. So, but I still have rotational tracking, yeah, because the point tracking isn't doing that. Okay, let's just see what the hotkey is. So home to recenter. So let's just recenter that. Okay. If we go to mapping, I've got translation compensation enabled. Your pitch, roll, X, Y, and Z all mapped to each other. My curve kind of looks like this. should do. Pitch is like this. Roll, I've kind of ramped down a bit on the roll, to be honest. And then X, I think we want to kind of drag X up a little bit. Maybe like that. Let's try it there. Y, yeah, we need to ramp that up a little bit more than that. We don't want asymmetric mapping for Z, so we kind of want maybe about there. What's that like? Let's try that. Okay, let's give those a go. You can always fiddle with them and change them during the game. So that seems to be basically working. Right, what I'm going to do then is get DCS fired up. I'm going to have a look at it in game and just see how that all maps out. Okay, here we are in DCS World with 6 degrees of freedom hybrid tracking. What's going on there? So I can zoom in, so I get all of this, that's great. I can come down here, I can have a look at my controls. All around there, it's nice. I appreciate I can sit and fiddle with these curves a lot more, so you know, if the sensitivity seems not what you'd expect, then that's just because I haven't spent any time tweaking it. But you know, I've got this kind of sideways view here. I can look behind. You see, we're back to the point that I've made in previous videos where I really don't feel 6 degrees of freedom really gives you that much more to really be, you know, for all the effort that we've gone to make this thing. I really am only concerned with this kind of being able to look around, you know. The value add of being able to do that or that, you know, moving up and down, is really adds nothing for me. It's not comfortable for me in this seat to move my head up and down like this to look at dials. I'd rather just point my head and press a button to zoom or something like that, you know. I think the only thing that I really get for this is the zooming, is this, yeah. The lateral and the vertical translation, I really don't see why you would go to the effort of what we've built for that. But this Z bit, great, that's fine. Okay, I'll give you that. But given that most people have a zoom view in DCS, for example, a button to kind of look out onto the horizon and pick targets out, it does kind of beg the question whether you would just make do with a button, you know. What's going on there? Oh, it's picking up. You can see on my point tracker there, every now and then it's picking up light from the window at the back. It is a very sunny day today, but I'm going to sound like I'm just trying to you know, evangelise EDTracker all the time, so I'm trying not to. But there's a prime example of what point tracking suffers from, is a little bit of light in the back, you know. It's only occasional, but what's going on there? Now it's something's completely moved my head position. Why has it done that? So it's like Opentrack has suddenly lost the home position for some reason. The question then, I suppose, is will this thing be staying on my headset? Am I keeping this? Is it a goer? And the honest answer for me is no. It's not, for all the effort we've gone to making this. For what it brings to the party, it's not worth it. Is my honest opinion. I know a lot of people will be thinking I'm only saying that because I'm involved in EDTracker and I'm just trying to big up EDTracker. I can only just give you my honest opinion of what I have experienced, and that's one thing to bear in mind comparing other people's YouTube videos, is I will only ever talk about stuff that I've actually got experience of, which is why you'll never find me commenting on TrackIR, whether it's better or worse, because I've never tried the bloody thing, so it's not fair on me to comment on it. But compared to homemade point tracking solutions based on, you know, FaceTrackNoIR, FreeTrack, Opentrack, that sort of approach, the extra 3 degrees of freedom that this thing has gotten us,
doesn't bring enough benefits for me. The Z is about the only thing that I could see some value in, and I can honestly live with a button to do that zooming in. I have a button anyway for spotting targets on distance, you know, in DCS and stuff. So, you know, I will always have that to do very detailed zoom views. I can live with that. The looking around stuff I can achieve with my pseudo 6 degrees of freedom technique that I've talked about in a previous video. I can get all of that. So all of this faff just for that extra 1 degree of freedom, you know, the benefit of that zooming, I just really don't see the point to it all, really. But, you know, I can accept that, you know, a lot of people have to have the best of the best, and there'll be 1-2% of the population out there that think that they've got to have it. So fine, you could do this if you really were that inclined. My honest opinion, I don't think it's worth it. But hey, each to their own. I'm a strong believer in that phrase. So you go ahead and do whatever makes you happy. That's it for now then. That's the end of this series. I hope it was interesting. We touched on a few different things, didn't we? It wasn't just all about head tracking. I'm now going to go and get myself a cold beer because it is freaking sweltering here. And we'll leave it at that. Next video, probably do something different. I've got a BBC Model B Micro that's got a defect in it which I need to fix. So I might kind of video that. We'll do a bit of electronics debugging and see if we can figure out what's wrong with it and fix it. Something a bit different. But until then, I will say adios, muchachos, and till next time. See you later.